I want to talk about the very real possibility that DC as a company might be now ashamed of Arrow. Of course, DC as a company involves a lot of different people who have a lot of different inputs and their own opinions as individuals. So I'm going to talk about things that I've seen from people who are reputable and have a significant voice. Geoff Johns is the current chief creative officer at DC, and he's been with the company for decades. I mean, his Teen Titans stuff was like the first comic books that I ever read. And he recently did an interview because obviously DC's Rebirth hit, and he was talking a little bit about the future of DC because as chief creative officer, he would know more than anyone. And in the interview, he spoke about how he was a fan of The Flash as a TV show. He said that it really opened up the character to new audiences and it really embodied hope and a lot of things that are very, very important to comic book characters and superheroes. But when talking about The Flash, he never ever mentioned Arrow at all. He didn't even name drop it. He didn't even, and you might be thinking, well, that doesn't mean that he doesn't like Arrow, and that's absolutely right. That doesn't mean that he doesn't like Arrow. But what is very telling is that immediately after they'd finished talking about The Flash, he was talking about the future of Rebirth and how it's moving forward. And he said, and I quote, "Let's say that you've been given the position of writing Green Arrow from scratch. Clean slate, you might say. Okay, I'm going to write this new character. And then when someone says, well, what about Black Canary? You might say, nope. And that means that you completely misunderstand these characters." So, I'm sorry, but for him to big up the Flash TV show, not mention Arrow at all, and then immediately say that whoever doesn't prioritize Black Canary in a Green Arrow work doesn't understand the character, that is hilarious. That's amazing. Because that's what comic book fans have been saying all along. And I want to really stress that there is no romance element mentioned. I mean, it is implied because we're going back decades and decades of Green Arrow and Black Canary always being a couple. But that shouldn't be the priority. I would rather Oliver and Black Canary never ever be romantically linked ever again, as long as Black Canary was well respected and consistent and done justice. Because it shouldn't be about their relationship, it should be about them as characters. They are both legacy characters. Because Black Canary, Dinah Lance took the mantle of Black Canary from her mother, and the Green Arrow mantle was passed on to Oliver's biological son, Connor. These are iconic legacy characters, and legacy characters and family-oriented characters are very, very important in the DC universe. So upholding these legacy characters is very important to DC as a company. It's what they're built on. That's why, almost all of DC works are put into families, because you've got the Arrow fam and the Bat fam and the Super fam, and they all have relationships that are very important to these characters. And, you can't have Green Arrow without Black Canary because she needs to exist, needs to be there because she is pivotal to who Green Arrow's always been in the comic books. And they are legacy characters, and Dinah Lance in particular, she took the mantle from her mother. She was a hero before she ever met Oliver. So to reduce her to a supporting character and then to go even further than that and reduce her to nothing but the girlfriend or the former flame is an injustice and only proves that you misunderstand what is important and what is relevant to the history of these characters. And having the chief creative officer of DC essentially throw so much shade and literally say, his exact words were, it means you completely misunderstand these characters. And of course, just because Jeff Johns is so far the most influential or highest up person at DC that I have seen weigh in on this, that doesn't mean he's the only one. His comments were just very, very recent and very relevant, and he is very reputable. So I thought that I'd cover him first. But then Andy Hoorie, who is the editor of the Green Arrow Rebirth, put on Twitter, actually a couple of hours ago, he said, Black Canary works without Green Arrow. Green Arrow doesn't work without Black Canary. You can take that in multiple ways. I'm sure there are many, many ways to interpret that, and there are many ways that people feel about these characters. But to me, and in my personal opinion, I took that, Black Canary is a meta-human. She's always been a better fighter and a stronger hero than Oliver, and Oliver has always endorsed that. Like, he's always talking her up. Like, there are comic books where he's getting into fights with thugs and he said something along the lines of, well, you should meet my wife. Like, he's always bigging her up to everyone. He is like completely in awe of her sometimes. She doesn't need him. She's never needed him, and I think that's one of the things he loves most about her. So from my standpoint, I took that as, she's a strong, empowering female character, and Oliver loves her. Oliver puts her on a pedestal. Oliver would fight anyone for her. Oliver would beat Guggenheim up for what he did to her. And, Benjamin Percy wrote Green Arrow Rebirth, and he went through a lot of negative backlash. He was getting harassed on Twitter. People were calling him a misogynist because he said that Felicity wasn't going to be in the Rebirth. These same people that did those things to him, every single time comic book fans complain about the direction of the show, those same people that harassed Benjamin Percy, that they say that it doesn't have to follow the comics, and the comics aren't relevant because it's a new rendition, and why should it follow the comics? How can you say that a comic book writer has to include your TV show character because you can't not have her, and then on the flip side of that say that the TV show can do whatever it wants because it's not relevant to the comics? Oh my god. These people literally, they contradict themselves in arguments because they just don't, they whine about everything, and even when they're winning, because they are, as far as the TV show is concerned, they're winning. They've won, they can have it. Most people have given up. And they're winning, and they're still finding things to complain about. It's like they just want to take everything from us and turn it into what they want it to be. Like, I'm exhausted with these people. And Gail Simone wrote Birds of Prey. She has written Dinah Lance comic books. She loves Black Canary. She loves Birds of Prey. She's really reputable. She's an amazing person. She has fought for a very long time to defend female characters and to stop them from being killed off in the name of shock value and in the name of male development. And for Gail Simone to write a character like Black Canary for years and to love that character so much, and then for Gail Simone to fight for female characters and to stop them from being killed that way, and then for Gail Simone to have to learn that happened to Black Canary, I can't even imagine how upsetting that must be. And Gail doesn't watch Arrow. She said that she's never watched it. And then when she said that she didn't know who Felicity was, she asked who Felicity was because she doesn't watch Arrow. And all these people attacked her and harassed her. But the thing is, why would she? If she doesn't watch Arrow, there's no reason why she would know who Felicity is, because Felicity is not, she's not relevant anywhere else. And the fact that Gail just innocently asked who she was because she genuinely didn't know and she got attacked for it is disgusting. And when Gail found out that had happened to Black Canary, last weekend at a convention, Gail worked really hard to meet Katie Cassidy, because all she knew was that Katie Cassidy played Black Canary, and she wanted to meet her. And Katie Cassidy had said that she'd wanted to meet Gale for quite some time too. And they finally met up, they took selfies together, and Gale couldn't praise Katie highly enough, and she talked about her on Twitter a lot and said that Katie was so nice. And so Gale just loves Black Canary, and she wants the best for a character that she has helped write and develop for a very long time. And people are harassing Gail Simone about it. And when Katie and Gale tweeted about Katie expressing interest in a Birds of Prey show that involved Gale, and then all these Felicity fans not only attacked Gale, but hated on her and Katie and said that none of them would ever have any hope of working on Birds of Prey. Gail Simone literally writes Birds of Prey, and it's very clear that these Felicity fans didn't do their research and didn't know who Gale was and was simply attacking her because she defended Black Canary. That's it. That was all of the substance that they needed to go on the assault. And so that puts Geoff Johns, Andy Coury, and Gail Simone as comic book writers who are against Arrow. And if Benjamin Percy never actually slated Arrow. Benjamin Percy he endorsed Arrow in a way. He said that having TV shows and comic books be separate was a good thing because it allowed multiple renditions and more stories of characters we love, which I agree with. So he wasn't against Arrow, but he wasn't really for it either, and he did go out of his way to confirm that Felicity would not be in his comic book, so he's kind of on the fence, I guess, but you could put him in the against Arrow column, so that's 4. And then you include Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith was very influential in the Green Arrow Volume 3 comic books. They're amazing. I love that series. It's got a lot of really good family stuff with all of the Arrow fan characters. It also includes the introduction of Mia Dearden, who was the second Speedy, and she was created by Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith directed an episode of The Flash, and someone had mentioned to Stephen Amell that, maybe you should have Kevin Smith on the show. And then Stephen said, oh, well, that would be awesome. And someone screenshotted that and tweeted it to Kevin, and then Kevin made a tweet about to Stephen to talk about one of his villains being on Arrow, and then Felicity fans came down on him and attacked him and accused him of being a misogynist because he liked a tweet that vaguely implied killing Felicity, even though that wasn't what he was talking about, until Kevin just put his hands up and said, I'm just going to go see if I can do it on The Flash then. So let's add Kevin Smith in the against Arrow column, so that's 5 comic writers that have thrown shade or given up or been chased out of Arrow. And then we have... I really, really don't want to dislike Willa Holland, because not only, is she Speedy, and Thea is an amazing character, and I love Thea's character, but Willa Holland was the voice of Aqua in Kingdom Hearts, and so I really don't want to dislike Willa, but that one interview that she did recently, it did really get under my skin, because it came across as so entitled, and I don't think that's how she meant it. I genuinely don't. I think it was more of a say things without thinking thing, but it did come across as genuinely so entitled, and I don't even know. Okay, she was talking about how the DC cinematic universe is separate from the TV universe, and she said that Marvel mashes up their films and their TV shows, blah blah blah. And then she was throwing shade because Grant Gustin wasn't cast as Barry in the cinematic universe, and said, basically, you're giving the world 2 different Flashes all of a sudden. And that is a valid point, and I do completely accept that that is a good point, but DC has never ever even so much as implied that their cinematic universe and their TV universe would overlap. They've never ever made that out, ever. And DC owns these characters. They are their creations to do with what they want. So if they decide they want two Flashes, that is their right, and they never ever implied any differently, so I don't know why you're getting petty about it, and I don't know why you're surprised. Also, I would like to point out that I love Grant as Barry, and I love the Flash TV show, but the schedule on CW shows is crazy. They work like 12 to 15 hours a day, 9 months out of the year. There's no way that Grant could feasibly do Flash and a movie at the same time. In order for him to be in a movie, they'd have to sacrifice the TV show. It's not plausible, just on a time restraint standpoint. Not to mention that TV shows and movies are completely different mediums. And some actors stay in TV their whole careers, the same way that some actors do nothing but movies. There are different mediums, and they work in different ways. There are loads of behind-the-scenes intricacies that people like me will never understand. And, you know, it takes different actors. You know, there's a certain level of, you know, movies are so much larger. There's so much more. I just don't think that these people realize that, you know, you're going up against actors like, in the cinematic universe, you've got like Will Smith and Ben Affleck. You know, these are really, really, really high caliber actors. And no matter how good Grant might be on the show, I find it hard to believe that he could go toe-to-toe with Ben Affleck and Will Smith without being outshined in every scene. Because they're just two different mediums that take different actors with different experiences. And I love Grant, but if they don't want him as their cinematic Barry, that is their right, and there are reasons for it. And for Willa to like throw shade about it, she's not even on The Flash. She doesn't even play a comic book character. And then she said that Arrow had to get rid of their take on the Suicide Squad due to the movies happening, because two versions couldn't exist at the same time. And why that is hard to say. And she said, when DC found out they were going to be doing their own movie, we had to axe all of the characters before we got to show them. A lot of people have complained about this, and I too am quite confused, because how can you give the world two different Flashes at the same time, but then take all of the Suicide Squad out of Arrow because the Suicide Squad movie's happening? And there could be... At first, I thought it was smoke and mirrors that Guggenheim was using to avoid negative backlash after he killed them. But honestly, a part of me thinks that DC did it to save these characters, because Arrow is not doing them justice and not utilizing them well, and maybe DC as a company wanted the world to see the Suicide Squad as they are meant to be done in the movie. And of course that's just my bias and speculation, but it is probably one of the only valid reasons I can think of, because it's not something I can explain. And when people say that if DC would let them have the characters, then it would be better. You know, and when Willa says we had to axe all of the characters before we got to show them. Well, no offense, but taking the Suicide Squad out of the Green Arrow show shouldn't be a problem, because the Suicide Squad aren't Green Arrow characters and they're not Green Arrow villains. So maybe you could actually utilize the source material, find out some actually relevant villains, and then develop them. Just a thought. And then Willa went on to say, it was annoying at first when Steven found out that there was going to be a Justice League movie. It only seemed, rightly so, that he would be playing Green Arrow, as well as Grant playing the Flash. It just seemed like the right normal answer. Once they said, no, you can't really fight against them for it, because they are the people that gave us a job in the first place. Yeah, exactly. This company gave you a job. They are like your boss's boss. And you're there making petty little comments about it and trying to undermine their professional decisions because Steven feels entitled to playing Green Arrow. And the thing is, the Green Arrow that he plays on the show isn't even like Oliver in the comic books anyway. So even if they were willing to give the TV actors a shot in the cinematic universe, Stephen hasn't personally showed them any kind of evidence that he can play Oliver as he would be handled in the cinematic universe. They haven't seen that from him. And I completely concede that that's not Stephen's fault. The writing is terrible and he's just doing what they tell him to, and he's just doing a job. But from DC, from a creative standpoint, watching a show that doesn't represent or respect a decades-old character, and the lead actor doesn't show you any potential for what you would want to see from that character, why would you consider them? And I think it's really, I just don't get how these actors can make comments like that and throw shade, and it's so entitled. It's so entitled that they keep saying Grant should have been Barry, or why wasn't Grant Barry? I mean, why? Just stay in your lane, do your job, mind your own business, and don't make petty comments about your boss's boss. It's literally the equivalent of me slandering my boss because somebody else got a promotion, but doing it publicly on the internet and like repeatedly. Like, you just, I don't get it. These actors don't have respect for DC. And DC, a lot of them don't want to know the show. And I actually, well, I wouldn't say it was an argument. I made a post. I made a post on Tumblr about Willa and how, Olicity fans were driving people away from the show, and that the cast was coming off really entitled. And this Olicity fan replied to me and basically said that Batman vs Superman was a mess, and that DC didn't know what they were talking about, and that Stephen and Willa were only sticking up for their colleagues, and that Twitter is an awful platform anyway. Right, so one, I never even mentioned Batman vs Superman. Two, your opinion on the movie is not relevant to what I was talking about. Three, you can't dismiss these personal attacks against professionals just because Twitter is an awful platform. Whatever, okay? But I'm gonna try and find that post I made afterwards. I mean, I was so fucking angry that someone had replied to my post with that I made another post, because this Olicity fan was saying that Batman vs Superman was such a mess, and that DC doesn't know what they're doing, and that the show is deviating from the comics, and the show is really good, and that even DC's cast keeps saying how much of a mess that the cinematic universe is, which is such bullshit. Oh my god. Anyway, I'm so fed up of Olicity fans saying that it doesn't have to follow the comic books, because it kind of does. Like, this Olicity fan actually said to me that the Arrow TV show had never once claimed that it was going to follow the comics. Oh my god. I hate this entire world. So let's see if I can find this fucking post. Right. When Olicity fans say that Arrow doesn't have to follow the comics and never made out that it would, it's a fucking adaptation. Nobody expects or wants a page-by-page translation, but the word adaptation and the fact that the show's opening credits say based on DC Comics characters means that comic fans have every right to be pissed, because we were promised a Green Arrow show in some capacity, and that isn't what we got. If there was a new Harry Potter movie and literally everything was different and the only thing that was right was Harry's name, and Ron and Hermione weren't in it but these two fucking randos named fucking Patrick and Debbie were instead, and then they killed off Ginny after sidelining her for ages, and then Voldemort wasn't even the villain, it was like another rando called Daniel or something, and Harry hardly ever used his wand, and Harry was nothing like his book equivalent and was instead passive and emotionally withdrawn and serious and brooding and boring, you're telling me that wouldn't upset fans? Honestly, just fuck off and let comic book fans be upset about this, because we have every right. I watched Justice League Unlimited when I was 9 years old, before I ever picked up a comic book. These characters are important to me and they matter, and seeing them disrespected is hard. If I want to write about it, if I want to rant about it and put it in the anti-tags so that no one has to see it if they don't want to, that is my fucking right to do so. So you can stay in your goddamn lane and stop with the it doesn't have to follow the comics bullshit, because you can continue to enjoy the show and leave the long-term Green Arrow fans to mourn in peace. So yeah, I don't know. I can't speak for DC. I can't speak for DC, and I can't speak for the fandom as a whole. I can only interpret things as I see them. But personally, if I was DC, and from what I've gathered, from what I've seen, it seems that DC isn't happy with the direction that the show has taken. Apparently, and this, I've heard people say this a lot, but I've never seen a source for this, so you can look it up if it's true. I don't know, don't quote me on it. But apparently before Batman vs Superman came out, they did a huge promotional event, and a lot of people were invited, including the casts of Gilmore Girls and The Big Bang Theory, and apparently the cast of Arrow wasn't invited. Like I said, I've seen people talk about that, but I don't know if it's true. For all I know, they were invited and they just couldn't make it, and everyone's turned it into something it's not. I don't know. Another thing that I've seen is Mark Guggenheim, and I saw a post about this, and the post itself did have a source listed. I didn't click on the link because I guess, to me, seeing the fact that it was sourced was enough. But apparently Ryan Reynolds, I mean, the Green Lantern movie was awful, everyone knows, we've all accepted that. But apparently Ryan Reynolds had to correct the script because Mark Guggenheim had gotten the Green Lantern oath wrong. That is the most basic of research and fact checking. That is oh my god, yeah. Mark Guggenheim needs to leave DC because he's just, I'm so done.